So let's discuss design team meetings done right. If we do them right, we're focused on learning, developing a collaborative culture, and most importantly, we're focusing on the results that we get. So why do we do design teams? First and foremost, our work is way too important to do it alone. We have the collective knowledge and strength inside of that room with all of those professionals, and we can learn from each other. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're improving student learning for all. One of our core fundamental beliefs at East Central High School is that we believe in the collective power of data-driven, goal-oriented, self-managing teams. We want to continue to sustain a collaborative culture, that there's a collective responsibility to ensure that all students are learning. It's our students, not my students, not your students, but our students. And I'm only successful if your students are successful, and you're only successful if my students are successful. We want to create collective decision making rather than you or I making decisions in isolation. We want to use this as a platform to improve and inform our practice in every classroom to ensure consistency. And lastly, it's not about me, but it's about we. So if we do them right, our design teams are the most impactful staff development that we have. We can learn from each other on a weekly basis. We want to develop consistency so that we're ensuring that all students are learning regardless of the content and regardless of the teacher. We want to ensure that there's consistency in what we teach, how we sequence the content. Our pacing, is it appropriate? Do we have common interventions that we're using for all students? And do we have best instructional strategies that every student deserves to have an opportunity to experience? So here's our expectations for design teams, what they should look like, sound like, and feel like. First and foremost, everybody comes prepared. They come with a quarterly calendar. They come with proficiency scales. You have your curriculum standards open, your IFDs to your TCMPC. Every person that comes to the meeting has their individual lesson plans ready to go, with laid out ahead of time. You bring your common assessment that you're going to be measuring your learning up against. You're going to have enough copies to share with all of your team members on common tasks, projects, and experiences based on evidence of effectiveness. What data do you have to support that? And everyone shares the airtime and participates. I'm going to say this, our best design teams are messy, which means there's a lot of paperwork out, there's a lot of computers open, and it looks like this huge collaborative professional learning community that's happening. It's critically important that we start on time. Every team has been required to establish those norms, but here's the important piece. Make sure you're reading those norms out loud each week. We follow them and hold each other accountable to those norms created. You've got to create some reciprocal accountability within that team. Make sure that when you take your notes that you list those that are present and those that are absent, so you know who you need to follow up with on the notes, but then also who shows up late, because we're trying to develop accountability. It's not fair to everybody else if we have the same person showing up late on a routine basis. Here's the expectation about roles. Every design team meeting will have a facilitator, that they follow the protocol and keep the group focused on student learning. You also want to make sure that you have a note taker every time you meet. This person gets on a common Google Doc and they will share the notes with the team and the appropriate administrator. They're going to be taking notes on what are the common tasks, assignments, learning targets, intervention strategies, as well as action items. So who is going to be responsible for what and by when, and what are we going to bring back to our next meeting? That's why you can keep up on it. So some critical questions that we want to ask in every design team, first and foremost, is what do we want students to learn? What are the knowledge, the skills, the dispositions, and what do we expect each student to acquire at the end of this lesson and our unit? So think about your daily activities. You have your calendar out. What is it that we want students to learn by the end of that class period? So what is it that we want them to learn? First, we got to dive into our guaranteed and viable curriculum. We need to study our content standards. We need to look at our critical content that we've isolated, and then how does that translate into student learning and skills? We want to commit to one another that what we will do, in fact, teach the agreed upon content. The second critical question that we want to make sure that we ask is, how will we know if students are learning? So how will we monitor each student's learning during our daily instruction and during the unit? So we should ask at the end of each class, how will we commonly assess? So as a team, we should be coming up with approaches on how we're going to be assessing the effectiveness of our lesson. Because remember, it's not my students, not your students, but our students. So what are some common strategies that we're going to be using to check students for understanding? SRQs, whiteboards, questions that we're going to commonly ask our students, exit slips that all students are going to get a chance to do. Are we going to come up with questions for clickers like Kahoot, common problems, writing prompts, things that we want students to turn and talk, and we're going to take some anecdotal evidence on whether they learned it. But these should be team-developed common formative assessments. I'm going to tell you this, it is the cornerstone of our design teams. We want to agree upon the criteria for judging the quality of student work. So we want, what is the evidence that students are learning at the end of each class that we will collectively gather? And then what will we bring back next week as evidence to show that our students are learning? Guys, these are our cold hard facts. We want to develop transparency in our design teams. So the second question is what are instructional practices that are going to help every student learn? So this is the part where everybody comes to the meeting already with some ideas to share with everybody on their team. That means you come with copies already ready of strategies and the practices that are going to work and data that supports it. So how are we going to increase our competence? We share these ideas. This is how we're really going to decrease the variability, that every teacher is learning from each other, that we have evidence that we're designing and we're creating the ultimate criterion for successful teaching and what student learning should look like. If we're doing collaborative teams right, we're sharing these strategies and tasks to ultimately improve learning for all students. So the third critical question that we want to make sure that we're asking in our design teams is how will we respond when students don't learn? So what do we put into place to provide students who are struggling with additional time and supports to acquire the essential knowledge, skills, and dispositions that we want them all to have? So what are we going to do for our struggling learners? First, you got to be able to look at your proficiency scales and say, how are we going to adjust to get them to that next level? How can we timely monitor and adjust so students don't miss out on new direct instruction? So you got to have that built into your calendar. And how will we accommodate for our various learners, our ELLs, our students who learn differently, our 504 students? Are we going to do small group? Are we going to do some one-on-one? Are there some computer-based applications? Are we going to commonly spiral our work? Are we going to maybe even do some pull-outs with other teachers, etc.? So the next critical question is, how are we going to extend learning for all of our students who are highly proficient? This is where your top achieving students, what are we going to do for them to extend their learning? For those students who have already learned the essential standards of the critical content that we want. So what ways can we get these students to the 5 on the proficiency scale? How are we going to adjust the time? How are we going to create alternate assignments? How are we going to give them independent research or projects? But here's the key, guys. It's not more work, it's different work. So you just really have to work together as a team to come up with that. The next thing is your design team should be focusing on the results. If you're looking at the end of every lesson, by the end of every unit, how are we commonly assessing our students? Then what results or evidence are we bringing back to the table? We got to assess the effectiveness based on our results. Guys, we can't wait till the STAR test. We can't wait to SAT. We can't wait to ACT. We can't wait till the AP test. We've got to be doing it on a consistent, routine basis. We've got to be reviewing that data together. What is our evidence of student learning? I'm just going to say this. We can't just hope that they're learning it and then pray when the test comes around in April, May that they get it. Hope is not a strategy. When we do our design team meetings right, they are self-directed. We create reciprocal accountability. Our design teams focus on student learning and what we can control. It's not focused on those things that we can't control. We make sure that there's meaningful collaboration. We're driven by protocols and norms, and we're focused on achieving the goals that we've established for our students. And by doing that, we not only improve our self-efficacy, but we improve the self-efficacy of those on our team. So design teams are an essential part of our culture at East Central High School. We use them to improve the collective capacity of others, including ourselves. It's the biggest vehicle to improve student learning, and it can be transformative to sustainable school improvement process. At East Central High School, it is who we are and it is what we do, and it is our key to becoming a high reliable school. So in final, we believe in our collective intelligence as teachers and as teaching teams. One of us is not as smart as all of us. We want to create synergy where the collective is stronger than its individual parts. Team interdependence is essential. I can't be my best without you, and you can't be your best without me. Collaboration is the key to decreasing the variability from room to room and from day to day and improving student learning outcomes for all. And we want to focus on what we can control, because to meet our mission of together we will inspire learning by creating interesting and meaningful learning experiences for every student, every minute, every day is why we come to work. And the key word in there is together. Let's have a great week. We love you guys. Keep pushing the threshold in your design teams. Keep coming prepared. Keep working to get better. Keep working to improve the self-efficacy of those in your team, because it's not my students, it's not your students, but it's all of our students. And we are only successful if everybody on our team and their students are successful in the end. We love you guys. Let's have a great week.